Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. And today we have Annabel Guichard, our researcher celebrity. Annabel has done his bachelor's and master's from University of Claude Bernard, Lyon, and then she moved to University Joseph Fourier for her PhD and moved to University of California, San Diego in 1996 and is there since then. We are privileged to have Annabel on this platform. And with warm welcome, I want to say thank you, Annabel, for taking time out and sharing your journey. We look forward to have you.
Thank you so much, Raja. It's a privilege. It's a real honor to be here with you and share that special moment.
Yes. So let's start with when you thought that you want to be in research, and then how the journey went, and you just decided to be here forever.
Well, it's an interesting question. For me, it wasn't the call for research, but it was the call for biology. I was unsure if I want to do research. Nobody had done research in my family before. A lot of my family were medical doctors, so that I was much more familiar with that field. But there was some calling toward biology since very early. Maybe I was 10 or 12, and how in those biology classes you could understand life in a way that was a complete eye opener. When you can see the teacher, shows you the inside of a dissected flower or an insect, or you understand how the bees have a special dance to tell each other where the field of flower is. This was a complete joy for me to discover that. So that my calling came from the biology, but not from the research side. I never imagined I could do research in biology. It came later.
So when was this time when you thought you started your interest in research?
It came, I think, progressively. My first thought of doing research came later, maybe at the end of high school, when I was first exposed to genetics. And I had never heard of genetics before. And that all of a sudden, the existence of chromosomes, of genes lined up along chromosomes, and how they are transmitted, how mutations can be recessive or dominant. This was the second step of my deeper interest for the field. And then I thought, wow, this is something that maybe I would want to pursue in life, pursue genetics. So this was my second calling. but then pursuing a career in research came maybe a few years later, once I was in college. And then you look at your options and what are you going to do with your life? And I was already deeply engaged in a path of molecular biology, genetics, and you had to choose between research and teaching.
Yeah.
And I had really a liking for both. But then once I started doing research, and especially after I was a postdoc, once I became a postdoc, and somehow all the hardship that had happened before started blossoming, maybe, the effort starting paying off. And when you can see that you can design an experiment and see some results, and this brings you so much joy that it feels like, oh, this is something I want to continue. I cannot let that go. But the teaching aspect of it should never be separated. Because what's the point of doing all these things and feeling this excitement if you cannot share it with, you have always undergrads, you can give a lecture, you have students, and then you can transmit the scientific approach or the excitement. And that's the most important, I would say. You can share the excitement with these different, and at all levels. Sometimes you have high school students, you have undergraduate students, you have postdoc, any level, it doesn't matter. But if you can share it, that brings that extra meaning to this profession. So
absolutely. And how we see research as like teaching is very integral part of it. When you join a lab, that's when you learn from your peers in the lab, like as simple as setting the pipette and doing anything. And as you progress, you just take the stage, and then now you are delivering all the knowledge, whatever you have learned, to the students.
That's very true. But as I'm getting older, I realize that the teaching always goes both ways. It's not that, oh, now I have all this experience, I have this field of research, I'm transmitting that knowledge, I get younger people to participate in that research. This is true, but now I still have to learn from my younger peers, because as time goes, I have not updated my knowledge in molecular biology or in whatever field. So, and the younger researchers know things that I don't. So it is always good to be humble and to keep learning. Or sometimes you even start forgetting what you knew before, and you have to learn it again. And technology becomes more and more complicated. So you have to confront your fears and learn again. This is very true.
No, I think how I know Annabel as a researcher, as a teacher. There is a saying Robert Frost said once, that education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. And what we have seen in Annabel is like, Annabelle listens to all our nonsense, whatever we speak, and she makes so much sense out of it that Annabelle can turn anyone into a researcher. That's what I can say.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I hope that could be true even with my own son.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Annabelle, how, because when you did your PhD, the world was in a different stage. Okay,
that's very true.
Not many people were into research, interested in that, and coming from Europe and then settling in United States, I'm sure that there was differences in either in research as well as in the cultures. How was your journey? Because what nowadays comes out also, that women in science, that itself is a very big
Yes.
topic.
That is true. That is true. I have to say that in biology, it has been a long time now that it's a field that has attracted women, and that women have become more and more present in that field. I have never felt any sort of belittling as a woman. I never thought of any less than a man as a biologist, but I think it would have been different if I had been going to physics, for example, or mathematics, and those fields are becoming progressively more open to women, but I think they have been a lot harsher. There has been maybe a feeling of maybe women not belonging there, and there has been confrontations. But in biology, it has been a long time that women have made their way there. But there's that other aspect of this question, which is coming from Europe. And at a time, I did my PhD in the early 90s. And then I came here in 96. And in fact, there was a revolution that has operated at that time, which is the internet revolution. So when I was doing my PhD, the internet did not exist yet. Only at the very end, people started sending emails and doing a literature search using digital media, and then accessing some information on the internet. That was really the beginning. And when I came here, that was 96. And then within, I don't know, 2 years or, the internet was everywhere and you could not envision doing research without it. People were communicating with emails constantly. The phone, people forgot about the phone. That became an instrument from the prehistorical instruments. So this is, it's funny because it's a revolution that happened fast, but then people didn't really realize it was happening. And so for me, it wasn't so much changing places, but how the digital revolution and internet revolution has changed research and how people can access any information in a snap. This has made research really different.
Absolutely.
And in mostly in good ways and sometimes in bad ways, because when you used to work on something, you go to the library and research any new publication that may have come out in that field, and it was slower, it was it was maybe in a way more in depth. You didn't go sniff everywhere quickly like a fox, or like I see my dog trying to sniff every possible rodent around. No, you had to be more you had to have that more quiet and in-depth attitude that now we are all information junkies, right? We're like, I want to know this, I want to know that, click, 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 click. I don't know if I can read still an entire publication. I read the abstract and look at a couple of figures, and our brain has lost that ability to absorb large body of information. So this is something that I'm sure you have an experience, because you were born in a time that you probably grew up already with cell phones and computers. So this has been always a part of your life, where I was more at that transition where I had to adjust to it.
I still remember my first exposure to research. I was sent to library for 2 weeks straight, and then I used to read the journals. The title was given to me that you have to read all these papers, make a summary out of that. So that's how I got introduced to research. And I believe what you just said right now is like so changed. Now, I don't think that 90% of the people go to the published articles and then, like, yes, we go online, print them, read them. That also some. The new generation of researchers are just even make their notes on their computer. That is so
true. That's very true.
Yes, yes.
So this is a revolution, and I think it's interesting to have been through the time of before that revolution and experience what it, a research that's probably closer to what it was 100 years ago than 20 years later, really.
Yes, yes. So, Annabel, when you started your PhD, and now when you are part of so many PhDs, people got, worked with you, the one most significant change you have seen in the attitude of researchers and the way research has transformed?
Do you mean during, comparing the time of my PhD and now?
Yes, yes.
I would maybe not be very original, but maybe consider the how the CRISPR-Cas9 has brought another revolution that came a little bit later. But I would say this, it is, who could have imagined 20 years ago that we would be able to just cut the DNA at a site of choice within a living cell, not just within a living cell, within a living fly, within a living mouse. This is something that it was unimaginable. And I remember somebody asking me years ago, what do you think would be the most important advance if you could just answer a question? I could not even imagine that. So I did not, in my wildest dream, think of CRISPR, that CRISPR could be discovered and applied to our research. On the other hand, you can say, well, it's a tool, but it's also a field of research.
Yes.
But it's a tool. And nowadays, I find that fantastic. People can create the mutations they want at the place they chose to answer very specific question. And all this within a few weeks or sometimes a few days. This is something that I would say has transformed the research, at least in our field, in genetics and biology, in a very profound way.
Nice.
And I'm very lucky because I did not have the, ambitious energy to jump into that, but my mentor, Ethan, forced me and he pushed me because that was happening in the lab. And I was working on something. I was working on toxins, and he said, no, you have to go for it. And I was very resistant, but he just, just like pushing somebody into the swimming pool, the water when they have to jump, and it could be a shock, but it could be a good shock.
Nice. Speaking of which, role of mentor in any researcher's life is very crucial and vital for their journey as well as their success, wherever they are heading to. When you speak about Professor Ethan Beer as a mentor, when you are mentoring someone and when you got mentored, like mentee and mentor, now these are the words which I believe cannot be fixed, because as you previously just said that you are learning when you are teaching. At the same time, you are doing both the ways. So you are mentoring.
Very true.
So when you see a mentor doing something, bringing the researchers out of their comfort zone, and then, as you said, pushing them in the swimming pool so that they can do the thing. And I'm sure you are also doing something like that. Where do you feel that a researcher should draw a line that this is something they can do and there are certain things which they cannot do?
That's an interesting question. I would say there are things, if you have a moral reservation about doing something, like imagine, I know some labs who are working on human embryos, and because those embryos are young enough, so they cannot carry their development past a certain point. That's quite early, but still. So or even on a kind of a more mundane perspective, some people don't want to work with mammalian systems. They don't want to inject drugs into a mouse or transform a mouse. So I think for many people, this is a line that should not be crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't believe in the rightfulness of your actions,
Mm-hmm.
and that even if somebody has pushed you in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
I think the person will not, you'd want to be always in agreement with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody should force someone to cross that line.
Yes.
And it's true in research. I think it's true in any field.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that what you're doing is useful to deepen a knowledge, or maybe in the future to maybe understand a disease or even treat a disease, and you are, sometimes possibly breaking that line because of a future goal, then it should be a personal decision rather than a mentor who pushes you.
Okay. Now, I think well said. So, what do you think what are the main considerations a student should think before committing themselves to research?
Well, they should first of all try it, and they will never waste any time doing research, because even if at the end professionally they have a different calling, or maybe they don't find a position that they are interested, doing research is a fantastic teaching experience. I think it trains people to have, first of all, a very critical mind. You don't conclude something unless you have all the elements to formulate a conclusion. You can't just say, oh, I want to conclude this, and you have to set up your demonstration, a well-controlled experiment that you can, once you present it to your colleagues, everybody will agree, yes, you have proven that, or at least you have brought together all the elements that strongly suggest your claim. And so many people nowadays just say what they choose to think, what they choose to believe. From the news, they go on some website that says something, 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 and it's not because you just say something that it's true. And I think that's a very, that's one of the aspects of science. You just don't say things because you think that's what they are. You prove it with A plus B, with a control. And that should be true everywhere, not just in science. It should be true for any field of human activity.
Yes.
So many people just choose to think what they choose to think without proving it.
Nice. I think the way you have explained research is, it's look like you are saying that every single person on this planet should do research for a certain period of time, so that research can give them this fresh version of themselves, that they are not biased, that they are open for everything as a
That's
research.
very true. That's very true. But actually, any activity entails some level of research.
Yes.
That it's not maybe scientific research, but if you do cooking, you are going to try to bake or cook a certain way, and you'll find out that this way works and this way maybe is not so good. And it is part of the research. You change the proportion of this ingredient, and then you will observe the consequences. If you're gardening or in, all these companies, they make products. They also do research to make it better, or make it more profitable, or make it easier to make. All these things it's not fundamental research, but it's a form of research. So I hope that everybody is doing research in their own way.
Nice. This was a brighter side of being a researcher. What are the darker sides, or you can say that the struggles are researchers, which you have either experienced or you have seen, that what are the struggles researchers have in their life?
Well, there could be many. Sometimes the path that was chosen is maybe not right, and it could be different reasons. Maybe there is a phenomenon that could be too difficult to study if it's not if it's too subtle, or if, for example, in biology, we have always the problems of genetic background. If you start working in behavior and try to answer behavioral question, you will always be confronted with the influence of the genetic background. So you think you're studying a mutation that affects the behavior of your animal, but in fact it's not that mutation, it's all the other genetic variations that you have brought. So there's a tremendous amount of control that needs to be applied. And that's just one example. When you are working in a certain direction, maybe based on an initial observation, but it actually the initial claim, the initial hypothesis may not be true, and then you can waste time in but this doesn't work because there always can be a good reason. And then sometimes people waste a year, 2 years, can be more, in a direction that leads to nowhere. So that can be a tremendous hurdle, because it can be leading even to some form of depression, because when all your efforts are pushed in one direction, and then it doesn't lead anywhere. So I think that's one thing that I have experienced. So now I'm careful when pushing in one direction or the other. Is I don't want to have to experience that again. So I go where I feel, where I think about it a little bit more.
So what are your, suggestions for, because nowadays, speaking of mental health in research is something which is upcoming, and now people are open, at least they have started talking about mental health, because initially, as you also said, like depression can be part of it. We have seen and observed that PhD candidates, they quit their PhDs after 4 years, after 5 years, which is a lot of time.
That's true. That I would say that's really important. That's an element to be watching out for, because it's a stage where the researcher is more vulnerable. The person is going for a diploma that takes years to acquire. Sometimes, it can be done in 4 years, but it can be a lot longer than this, depending on the country, depending on the subject. And it puts the person in a state of vulnerability, because the person will equate himself or herself with the accomplishments. And if the accomplishments are not, don't go as expected, that can be extremely damaging. I had difficult time during my PhD, and I've been in that position where I was supposed to defend in 6 months, and there was no data to write a thesis. There was no data to present, and I was fortunate. I obtained an extra year of funding, and only in that last year, everything worked out. But I was lucky. I believe I was very lucky. And so, yes, I think it's a very important thing to be careful about when in a lab, whether it's the mentor or the other scientists that are around the grad student, have a lot of respect and a lot of support, because it's a very difficult time of life. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it flies, and it's very joyful. But I would say most of the time it's stressful, most of the time it's challenging. And so this graduate student needs our support the most and understanding, because they are going through something very difficult. And it's not always fair. Some of them have a much harder times than others. And it's not necessarily because there are any less good scientists. It could be that the path they have chosen or the subject that somebody else has given them is more difficult. And it really can be not fair. So yes, let's all have that thought and support to all the graduate students.
Yeah. Speaking of which, more often this comes up that most of the PhD students, when they start, the data which they use for their thesis and on which they actually earn the PhD is done in last 2 years.
That's true. I mean, that was true for me even the last year, I would say. Yeah, or it could be that they need those first few years to just become the scientists they need to be to produce that data. And that, so they are confronted to these little, and that sometimes can be just simply technical, those techniques, even so they don't seem so complicated on the paper, to get everything right. That's the thing. These techniques have several steps, and every step has to be right. So it's difficult to have every step right. You could do 9 steps right, but if the 10th step is not done right, the experiment will not work. So that could be that, but that's just kind of a simple example. But they're also, I would say, sometimes the questions that are, you know, some questions are much easier to answer than others. And maybe some grad students are given some, you know, oh, you're here for 6 years. Why don't you explore this? And this could be a very difficult project.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that is very well said. Also, here I would like to tell all the audience and viewers that one thing which is named as discipline, that is the most important thing when you are a PhD student, and is there forever for every researcher. Discipline is one thing which can take you places that motivation just cannot. So motivation is good, very good.
Yeah, I had never thought of it like that. Yeah, motivation is the fuel, but discipline is to channel that fuel, that energy correctly.
Yes.
Because energy alone is, you know, you definitely need it, but you need that carefulness. You need those notes, and you need to have you know, that inner peace also. You know, sometimes people are very excited, but you know, you need that calm to really look carefully at things. In biology in particular, how you look at things is, I would say, critical. And we're coming back to the visual aspect.
In fact, when you said high energy PhD students, in our conversation with professors and in the later stages when they are mentors, one thing which comes out is like it is tough to handle a very energetic student because they want to do everything. So that's when you say that channelizing, the role of mentor comes in there, that they channelize the energy that, okay, let's do steps. Do this first, and then instead of starting 10 things at one point, you do 10 things at 10 different time points. This is also one thing which came up, that mentors also have tough time if there is a very energetic student in the lab. What are your experiences about that?
Oh, I don't know if I have experience about that. I don't think I was such an energetic grad student myself. And then later on, I would say that, you know, a critical point is to combine these different aspects, the passion that a lot of grad students have, and the desire to participate, the desire to contribute and to deliver, to discover these new things. But as always, and I would say in biology in particular, it's important to combine these different qualities. And the passion is one of them. The ability to formulate ideas and reasonings is another one. The ability to conduct an experiment from A through Z and in a very careful way. That's also in an experimental field. That's also very important. So all that different, the energy needs to be channeled from different standpoints so that you can, some people are very bright, but it's not always enough. And some people are very energetic. It's not enough. You need a little bit of everything, and a dose of faith also sometimes to succeed. And sometimes there's a need of luck also, right?
Okay. So Annabel believes in luck?
I don't know. Not completely, but it seems like sometimes you need some, or sometimes if it comes, then you can welcome the luck.
Very good. So when the researchers, speaking of luck, most of the people who doesn't belong to biology science or science per se, they say that if you are a scientist, how can you talk about luck?
Luck? How can you talk about luck being a scientist? It's really hard to talk about luck because in principle, luck is something that's not scientific. So you say, oh, has anybody studied luck? I don't know. I have never looked at it. But every time I see some results, I think, wow, this is so lucky. It worked. and it seems very lucky. So, but I can always welcome it, like I was saying. But I don't know if it's really a thing. It's hard to know. Like some people seem to be often lucky, and some other people seems often unlucky. That is not fair, really.
Okay. So let ask a question. That how do you think that a researcher should be a celebrity, or are they a celebrity?
Well, we know some examples of people who have become celebrities through science, and that did not do much good to them. Either it went to their heads, and then they started becoming very power hungry or thirsty for more fame, or they even started manipulating data to get more media attention. So I would say the satisfaction of contributing by your seminars, your publication, that is already plenty of recognition. But of course, you have all these good examples of fantastic scientists who have earned their fame because of their finding, and they have completely pursued that their path in the best possible way. So I think we have seen both examples. It's just like a little bit like people who win the lottery, and then some people do something good out of all that money. They make sure their family is out of poverty, and they can do what they have always dreamed of, and it's for the better. But sometimes it pushes some people into the wrong path. So I think we have seen both cases in science. And so yeah, it can go both ways, of course.
Yeah. So at Empowering Science Foundation, win this series called Researcher Celebrity, where we are having this conversation. What we believe in is that every single researcher is a celebrity. And today, we know Annabel Guichard as a researcher celebrity. Thank you very much, Annabel, for taking your time out. And just a brief note that Albert Einstein once said that what is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. We would like to say thanks to Annabel here for being a researcher celebrity today. And for our viewers, keep going. And Annabel, your last words for the audience, for the researchers, what you want to say?
I would say keep the curiosity on, because you can be a researcher in any field in your life and in the lab as well. So that is a constant source of joy, is to keep learning.
Absolutely. Thanks. With this, we'll say viewers keep tuning for another episode of Researcher Celebrity. We'll see you all. Thank you, Annabel, for sharing the journey with all of us.
Thank you so much.